Elijah Donovan slouched in his seat aboard the interstellar cruiser, the Nebula Dream. His lanky frame, always a bit too much for standard seating, was further emphasized by his restless shifting. In his hands, he clutched a datapad, its screen displaying a blinking cursor on a blank document. Writer's block, his oldest and most persistent nemesis, had him firmly in its grip. For 3 hours, he'd been trying to craft an opening line that didn't sound like it had been ripped from the bargain bin of rejected sci-fi tropes. The year is 2342. No. Across the swirling nebulae. Absolutely not. He was starting to think that maybe interstellar travel wasn't the best cure for creative stagnation after all. Seated next to him, a woman with hair the color of starlight and eyes that shimmered with an inner luminescence was completely absorbed in her own holonovel. He'd been attempting to work up the courage to speak to her for the duration of the flight, but his social anxiety was putting up a valiant defense. Finally, desperation overriding his nerves, he managed a strangled, His voice cracked. He cleared his throat, wincing at the sound, and tried again. What brings you to the Andromeda sector? The woman's luminescent eyes flickered towards him, a brief acknowledgement, before returning to her book. Work, she said, the single word delivered with an economy of effort that bordered on dismissal. Elijah nodded, as if this monosyllabic response was the most profound thing he'd ever encountered. Right. Work. That's good. I'm here for, A sharp ping from his communication implant sliced through his stammering. Elijah winced, tapping his temple to accept the incoming message. A holographic face materialized in his field of vision, a being with green skin, 4 eyes that blinked independently, and a mouth filled with needle-like teeth. Mr. Donovan, the alien voice rasped, I'm Gra Thor, executive of the late Zachary Quint's estate. I am contacting you regarding your inheritance. Elijah blinked, momentarily forgetting his attempted flirtation. Zach Quint. He's dead. The alien nodded solemnly, its 4 eyes conveying a surprising amount of gravitas. I'm afraid so, sir. Mr. Quint passed away 3 standard days ago. In his will, he left you his entire estate on Azra. I am transmitting the coordinates now. Please report to my office upon your arrival for the full details of your inheritance. The message ended abruptly, leaving Elijah staring blankly ahead. Zach was dead. They hadn't spoken in years, not since things had gotten complicated back on Earth. And now, he'd left Elijah an inheritance. On Azra, of all places. Azra was known for its stunning vistas and exotic culture, but also for its labyrinthine bureaucracy and bewildering customs. Bad news? The woman next to him asked, a hint of genuine concern in her voice this time. Elijah turned to her, his mind still reeling. My friend died. And apparently, he left me something, on Azra. She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Azra? That's quite a place to inherit something. I hear the beaches are lovely, though the local customs can be a bit unusual. Unusual how? Elijah asked, his curiosity piqued despite his grief and confusion. But at that moment, the ship's AI announced their impending arrival at the Andromedan spaceport. The woman stood, gathering her belongings. Good luck with your inheritance, she said with a small, enigmatic smile. And a word of advice, on Azra, always read the fine print. Before Elijah could press her for clarification, she was gone, swallowed by the throng of disembarking passengers. The spaceport on Azra was a sensory overload. Beings of every conceivable shape, size, and color bustled about, their voices a cacophony of languages that Elijah's universal translator struggled to keep up with. He clutched his meager luggage close, feeling utterly overwhelmed and out of place. A hovering droid, polished to a blinding sheen, approached him, its optic sensor scanning his face. Elijah Donovan, it inquired in a tinny, synthesized voice. At Elijah's nod, it continued, "Please follow me. I will escort you to the estate of the late Zachary Quint." As they made their way through the crowded streets, Elijah couldn't help but gawk at the alien architecture. Buildings spiraled impossibly high, defying gravity with an almost arrogant grace. Holographic advertisements flickered in mid-air, hawking products he couldn't even begin to comprehend. The sheer alienness of it all was both exhilarating and deeply unsettling. Trying to glean some information, Elijah ventured, addressing the droid, "So, what exactly did Zach leave me? A house? Money?" The droid's head swiveled a full 180 degrees to face him, its expressionless face somehow managing to convey disapproval. "I am not authorized to disclose that information. Mr. Gra Thor will provide all necessary details." They continued their journey in silence, traveling to the outskirts of the city where the gleaming towers gave way to more modest dwellings. Finally, the droid came to a stop in front of a small, dilapidated structure that looked like it had seen better days, possibly centuries ago. "We have arrived," the droid announced, its tone utterly devoid of emotion. Elijah stared at the ramshackle building, a wave of disappointment washing over him. This was what Zach had left him. This is what Zach left me. Before the droid could respond, the door burst open with surprising force. A vision in blue emerged. A woman with skin the color of a clear summer sky, hair like spun silver, and eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies stood before him. She was also, Elijah couldn't help but notice, incredibly beautiful. "Husband," she cried, rushing towards him with open arms. Elijah barely had time to sputter, "What?" before he found himself enveloped in an enthusiastic embrace. The woman's skin was cool to the touch, and she smelled faintly of ozone and exotic flowers. "Oh, how I've longed for your arrival," she exclaimed, pulling back to gaze at him adoringly. "I am Lumera, your devoted wife. Zach spoke so highly of you. I know we will be very happy together." Elijah's brain, which had been struggling to keep up with events since his arrival on Azra, finally gave up and shut down completely. He stood there, mouth agape, as Lumera continued to beam at him. I think there's been a mistake," he finally managed to stammer. Lumera's smile faltered slightly. "A mistake?" But Zach's will was quite clear. "You are to inherit his estate, which includes me, of course. It's our way. When a husband passes, his wife becomes the responsibility of the one named in the will." She tilted her head, studying him with an innocent curiosity. "Did Zach not explain this to you?" "No," Elijah said weakly. "No, he most certainly did not." At that moment, a portly, green-skinned alien waddled up the path, wheezing slightly. "Ah, Mr. Donovan," he exclaimed between breaths. "I see you've met the lovely Lumera. I'm Gra Thor. We spoke earlier. Perhaps we should step inside to discuss the details of your inheritance." Elijah nodded numbly, allowing himself to be led into the house. The interior was just as shabby as the exterior, with mismatched furniture and peeling wallpaper. Gra Thor settled himself into a creaking chair while Lumera guided Elijah to a worn sofa. "Now then," Gra Thor began, pulling out a stack of documents that seemed to defy the laws of physics with their sheer volume. "As per the last will and testament of Zachary Quint, you, Elijah Donovan, are hereby bequeathed his entire estate on Azra. This includes this property, all its contents, and, as is customary, the hand of his widow in marriage." Elijah's head was spinning. But I can't just marry someone I've never met. And what about Lumera? Doesn't she get a say in this?" Lumera patted his hand reassuringly. "Oh, my dear husband, of course I have a say. And I say yes. It's a great honor to be chosen. Zach must have thought very highly of you." "But we don't know each other," Elijah protested, feeling increasingly like he was trapped in some bizarre, intergalactic sitcom. That's what the bonding ritual is for, Lamera explained cheerfully. It will join our minds and souls, allowing us to truly know each other. It's quite passionate, really. We can perform it right away if you'd like. Elijah felt the blood drain from his face. I think I need some air. He stumbled to his feet and out the front door, gulping in the alien atmosphere. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some kind of elaborate prank. Any moment now, Zack would jump out from behind a bush, laughing at the expression on Elijah's face. But Zack didn't appear. Instead, a group of young women in impossibly short skirts came sauntering up the path. They were an array of alien hues, green, purple, orange, and they all had their eyes fixed on Elijah. "Welcome home, Master," they chorused in unison, their voices sultry and oddly synchronized. Elijah backed away, bumping into the door frame. Who are you?" "We're your servants, of course," a purple-skinned girl giggled, sidling up to him and pressing herself against his side. "Here to attend to your every need." Elijah yelped, jumping away and nearly tripping over his own feet. I didn't, I can't." He sputtered, completely overwhelmed. Lamera appeared in the doorway, her expression concerned. "Is everything all right, husband?" "Ah, I see you've met the house staff. They came with the property. Quite skilled, from what Zack told me." Elijah's head was spinning. This was too much. Way too much. He needed to think, to process, to figure out what the hell was going on. He backed away from the group of eager house staff and Lumera's concerned gaze. I need a moment," he managed to say before darting back into the house. He found himself in what appeared to be a study, filled with strange artifacts and blinking consoles that hummed with an unknown energy. Elijah leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath. His hand brushed against something, and suddenly, with a soft whir, a hidden panel slid open. Elijah stumbled backward, staring at the revealed compartment. Inside was a tangle of wires and blinking lights surrounding what looked like a small, pulsing orb of energy. And there, wedged between two circuit boards, was a handwritten note. With shaking hands, Elijah pulled out the note and unfolded it. He recognized Zack's messy scrawl immediately. "Elijah. If you're reading this, I'm dead, and you've stumbled into something bigger than either of us could have imagined. Trust no one. The fate of the galaxy may rest in your hands. P.S. Sorry about the wife thing. It was necessary for the cover. You'll thank me later, maybe." Elijah stared at the note, then at the pulsing orb of energy. "Oh, Zack," he murmured, a mixture of grief and exasperation in his voice. "What the hell have you gotten me into?" As if in response, the orb pulsed brighter, and for a moment, Elijah could have sworn he heard Zack's laughter echoing in the room. Elijah's mind raced as he stared at the pulsing orb in Zack's cryptic note. The fate of the galaxy, trust no one. What had his old friend been involved in? A knock at the study door made him jump. He hastily shoved the note into his pocket and slammed the hidden panel shut. "Husband." Lumera's melodic voice called. "Is everything all right?" Elijah took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. "Yes," he called back, wincing at the tremor in his voice. Just getting acquainted with Zack's old office." He opened the door to find Lamera standing there, concern etched on her beautiful blue features. Behind her, he could see the house staff hovering in the hallway, their eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him deeply uncomfortable. "You seem distressed," Lamera observed, reaching out to touch his cheek. Her fingers were cool against his skin. "Perhaps we should proceed with the bonding ritual. It will ease your mind and help you adjust to your new life here." Elijah backed away, bumping into Zack's cluttered desk. "Look, Lamera, I appreciate the offer, but this is all happening very fast. I just found out my friend died, and now I'm supposed to inherit his house, his wife, and a bunch of, enthusiastic staff. I need time to process this. Lumira's brow furrowed. But the bonding ritual is essential. Without it, our union isn't officially recognized. There could be complications. Complications? Elijah echoed, a sinking feeling in his stomach. One of the staff members, a green-skinned woman with eyes like liquid gold, stepped forward. If the union isn't formalized within 48 hours of the heir's arrival, the entire estate reverts to the Azuran government, she explained, her voice far more businesslike than her appearance suggested. Elijah's head was spinning again. So, if he didn't go through with this ritual with someone he just met, he lost everything Zack left him, including this house and all its contents. His hand unconsciously moved to his pocket, where Zack's note felt like it was burning a hole. Lumira nodded solemnly. I'm afraid so. It's our way. The ritual ensures that the new union is strong, that the widow is cared for, and that the estate remains intact. Elijah slumped against the desk, running a hand through his hair. This is insane, he muttered. Perhaps, Lumira agreed, a hint of amusement in her voice. But it is what it is. Zack chose you for a reason, Elijah Donovan. He must have trusted you a great deal. Trust no one, Zack's note had said. But could that include Lumira? She seemed genuine in her desire to help him, to welcome him. And yet. I need some time, Elijah said finally. Just a little while to think things over. Is there somewhere I can freshen up? Lumira's face lit up. Of course. How inconsiderate of me. You must be exhausted from your journey. I'll show you to your room. Our room, I suppose. As she led him through the house, Elijah couldn't help but notice how the staff seemed to melt into the shadows, always present but just out of sight. It was unnerving. The bedroom was surprisingly spacious, with a large window overlooking a garden that seemed to glow in the alien twilight. Lumira showed him the adjoining bathroom, explaining the various fixtures with the patience of someone used to dealing with off-worlders. I'll leave you to rest, she said finally. But remember, Elijah, time is of the essence. We must complete the ritual soon. As soon as the door closed behind her, Elijah slumped onto the bed, his head in his hands. What had he gotten himself into? More importantly, what had Zack gotten him into? He pulled out the note again, reading it over and over. The fate of the galaxy, trust no one. It sounded like something out of one of his failed sci-fi novels, but this was real, all too real. He stood, pacing the room. He needed to think, to plan. He had less than 48 hours to figure out what was going on, what Zack had been involved in, and whether he could trust Lumira or anyone else in this bizarre household. As he turned, something caught his eye. There, on the bedside table, was a framed photo. Elijah picked it up, his breath catching in his throat. It was a picture of him and Zack, taken years ago at a sci-fi convention. They were both grinning, arms slung over each other's shoulders, looking young and carefree. Elijah traced Zack's face with his finger. What did you get yourself into, old friend, he murmured. And more importantly, what have you gotten me into? As if in response, he heard a soft click from somewhere in the room. Elijah froze, his eyes darting around. There, in the corner, was that panel always there? Heart pounding, he approached the wall. Sure enough, another hidden compartment had opened, revealing a sleek, unfamiliar device. As Elijah reached for it, the device sprang to life, projecting a holographic message. Zack's face flickered into view, a wry smile on his lips. Zack's holographic image flickered, his voice tinny but clear. Hey, Elijah. If you're seeing this, things have gone sideways fast. I don't have much time, so listen up. That orb you found. It's a Xylan data core. Holds information that some very powerful people want to keep buried. Elijah stared at the holographic Zack, his mind racing. Xylan? What's Xylan? Doesn't matter right now, Zach's hologram continued, brushing aside the question. What matters is that you protect that data core. It contains proof of a galactic conspiracy that could unravel everything. I was close to exposing them when Zach's image flickered violently, his voice breaking up. They found me. They're watching you now, Elijah. Trust no one. Get off Azra as soon as you can. There's a contact on the planet Xylos, Jax. Find him. He can help you. The hologram abruptly cut out, leaving Elijah standing alone in the room, the Xylan data core humming softly in its hidden compartment. Xylos? Another mystery layered on top of the already bewildering situation. He glanced at the door, his mind reeling. Lumera and the house staff were out there, waiting. Could he trust them? Zach's warning echoed in his mind, trust no one. He carefully closed the hidden panel, concealing the device. He needed to act fast, but he couldn't afford to be reckless. He had to play along, at least for now. He took a deep breath and opened the bedroom door. Lumera was waiting in the hallway, her expression a mixture of concern and anticipation. Elijah? Are you feeling better? Elijah forced a smile. Yes, much better. Just needed a moment to gather my thoughts. Lumera nodded understandingly. Good. Then perhaps we should proceed with the introductions. You haven't properly met the staff. She led him back into the main living area, where the house staff was lined up, waiting expectantly. There were 5 of them, each with distinct alien features. The green-skinned woman with golden eyes stepped forward. I am Zara, head of household. I oversee the smooth running of the estate. The others introduced themselves in turn, Phelan, a tall, slender being with iridescent skin, Kalen, a stocky, purple-skinned woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, Rix, a small, wiry creature with bright orange fur, and Lyra, a gentle-looking being with translucent wings. Elijah nodded, trying to remember their names and faces. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being scrutinized, assessed. It's nice to meet you all, he managed to say. We are here to serve you, Master, Zara said, her voice carefully neutral. Please do not hesitate to ask for anything you require. Right, Elijah said, feeling deeply uncomfortable. Well, I am quite hungry. Perhaps something to eat? Zara nodded. Of course. I will prepare something immediately. What would you prefer? Surprise me, Elijah said, hoping he wouldn't regret those words. As Zara disappeared into the kitchen, Lumera turned to him. Perhaps a tour of the estate while we wait for the meal. It's not much, but Zach was quite fond of the gardens. Elijah hesitated. He wanted to search the house for clues, for anything that could shed light on Zach's secret life. But he couldn't risk arousing suspicion. A tour sounds lovely, he said, forcing another smile. The gardens were surprisingly beautiful, a riot of exotic plants and flowers he couldn't even begin to identify. Lumera seemed to know the name and properties of every plant, explaining them with an almost childlike enthusiasm. As they walked, Elijah tried to steer the conversation towards Zach. So, what exactly did Zach do here on Azra? He asked casually. I never really knew what he was up to. Lumera's expression clouded slightly. Zach was a researcher. He studied Xylan artifacts. He was very dedicated to his work, but also very secretive. Xylan artifacts? Elijah asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. What kind of artifacts? I don't know the specifics, Lumera said, shaking her head. He never spoke about his research. It was forbidden knowledge, I believe. Elijah's heart skipped a beat. Forbidden knowledge. Just like in Zach's message. This was all starting to connect. As they continued their tour, Elijah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He caught glimpses of the house staff lurking in the shadows, their eyes following his every move. When they returned to the house, Zara had prepared a meal of strange, alien delicacies. Elijah tried to eat politely, but the food was unlike anything he had ever tasted. After the meal, Lamera suggested they relax in the living room. As they sat together on the worn sofa, Elijah felt increasingly trapped. He needed to find a way to get off Azra, to find Jax on Xylos. But how? He decided to take a risk. Lamera, he said, I've been thinking about the bonding ritual. I'm not sure I'm ready for something so permanent. Is there any way to postpone it? Just for a few days? Lamera's expression turned serious. I'm afraid not, Elijah. The ritual must be performed within 48 hours. Otherwise, the estate reverts to the Azuran government. It's the law. Elijah sighed inwardly. He had hoped to buy himself some time, but it seemed his options were limited. Is there anything I can do to convince you? Lamera asked, her voice soft. Anything at all? Elijah hesitated. He could tell her the truth, tell her about Zach's message, about the Xylan data core, about the galactic conspiracy. But could he trust her? Zach's warning echoed in his mind, trust no one. He made a decision. He would tell her part of the truth, enough to gain her trust, but not enough to put her in danger. Lamera, he said, leaning closer, there's something I need to tell you. About Zach. He wasn't just a researcher. He was involved in something dangerous. Something that could put us both in danger. Lamera's eyes widened. Dangerous? What do you mean? Elijah took a deep breath. I can't explain everything right now. But I need your help. I need to get off Azra. Can you help me? Lamera stared at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Elijah thought he had made a mistake. But then, she nodded slowly. I will help you, Elijah, she said. But you must trust me. And you must promise me that you will tell me everything. Elijah nodded, relief washing over him. He had found an ally. But he knew that their journey had just begun, and the dangers that lay ahead were greater than he could possibly imagine. All right, Lamera said, her voice low, the first thing we need is a ship. A small, discreet one that won't attract attention. Can you get one? Elijah asked, hope flickering in his chest. Lamera nodded. I have contacts. But it will cost us. Zach left me a small fortune in credits, but I was hoping to use them to renovate this place. We can worry about that later, Elijah said, his voice urgent. If Zach was right, the fate of the galaxy might depend on this. Lamera looked at him skeptically. The fate of the galaxy? That sounds a bit dramatic, doesn't it? Maybe, Elijah conceded. But Zach wasn't prone to exaggeration. If he said there was a galactic conspiracy, I believe him. Lamera sighed. All right. I trust you. I'll contact my sources. We should have a ship within a few hours. What about the staff? Elijah asked, glancing around nervously. Can we trust them? Lamera hesitated. They are loyal to the estate, and therefore to us. But I don't know if we can trust them with this. They might report us to the authorities. Then we keep them in the dark, Elijah said firmly. We tell them we're going on a short trip, nothing more. Lamera nodded in agreement. Good. I'll handle the arrangements. In the meantime, you should try to find out more about this Xylan data core. What does it contain? What kind of conspiracy was Zach investigating? Elijah nodded, his mind already racing. He needed to examine the data core, but he couldn't risk being discovered by the staff. He needed a distraction. I'll tell Zara that I want to learn more about Azuran culture, he said. Ask her to give me a crash course in local history. That should keep her busy for a while. Lamera smiled. Good thinking. I'll go make the arrangements for the ship. Meet me back here in an hour. As Lamera left, Elijah turned his attention to the study. He carefully closed the door and reactivated the hidden panel, revealing the Xylan data core. He examined the device closely, trying to figure out how to access its contents. The device was sleek and unfamiliar, with no obvious controls or interfaces. He ran his fingers over its smooth surface, searching for a hidden button or switch. Suddenly, a small panel slid open, revealing a port. Elijah rummaged through Zach's desk, searching for a cable or adapter that might fit the port. He found a small data cable with a universal connector. He plugged it into the port and connected the other end to a nearby console. The console flickered to life, displaying a series of alien symbols. Elijah stared at the symbols, trying to decipher their meaning. He recognized a few basic commands, but the rest was gibberish. He spent the next hour poring over the console, trying to unlock the secrets of the Xylan data core. He managed to access a few basic files, but the important data was encrypted. He needed a decryption key. As he was working, he heard a knock at the door. He quickly closed the hidden panel and shut down the console. Master Elijah, Zara's voice called from the other side of the door, I have prepared a lesson on Azuran history and culture for you. Elijah sighed inwardly. He had hoped for more time, but he couldn't afford to arouse suspicion. Come in, Zara, he said, trying to sound enthusiastic. Zara entered the study, carrying a stack of ancient tomes and holographic displays. She launched into a detailed lecture on Azuran history, but Elijah found it difficult to concentrate. His mind was still focused on the Xylan data core and the secrets it contained. After what seemed like an eternity, Zara finally finished her lesson. I hope you found that informative, Master, she said, her eyes fixed on him. Yes, very informative, Elijah said, trying to sound sincere. Thank you, Zara. As Zara left, Elijah immediately returned to the Xylan data core. He had a few more hours before Lamera returned with the ship. He had to make the most of his time. He reopened the hidden panel and reactivated the console. He spent the next few hours hacking into the encrypted files, searching for the decryption key. He was making progress, but it was slow and painstaking work. Just as he was about to break through the final layer of encryption, he heard a voice behind him. What are you doing, Elijah? Elijah whirled around to see Lamera standing in the doorway, her expression a mixture of surprise and suspicion. He had been so engrossed in his work that he hadn't heard her return. I can explain, he stammered, his heart pounding in his chest. Lamera stepped into the study, her eyes fixed on the Xylan data core. What is that thing? She asked, her voice low. Elijah knew he couldn't lie to her. He had promised to tell her everything. It's a Xylan data core, he said. It contains information that Zach was investigating. Information that some very powerful people want to keep buried. Lamera stared at the data core, her expression unreadable. Xylan, she whispered. But that's forbidden. I know, Elijah said. But Zach believed it was important. He thought it could save the galaxy. Lamera hesitated. What kind of information is on that data core? I don't know yet, Elijah admitted. I'm trying to decrypt the files, but it's taking time. Lamera stepped closer to the console, examining the alien symbols on the screen. I might be able to help, she said. I know a little about Xylan technology. Zach taught me some things. Elijah stared at her in surprise. You do? Why didn't you say so? Lamera shrugged. I didn't think it was important. Besides, Xylan technology is dangerous. It's best left forgotten. Maybe, Elijah said. But Zach thought it was worth the risk. And so do I. Lamera sighed. All right. I'll help you. But we need to be careful. If anyone finds out we're messing with Xylan technology, we'll be in serious trouble. Elijah nodded in agreement. I know. But we don't have a choice. The fate of the galaxy depends on it. Lumera joined Elijah at the console, her fingers flying across the alien interface with surprising dexterity. With her knowledge of Xylan technology, she was able to bypass several layers of encryption that had stymied Elijah. I can't believe Zack never mentioned you knew so much about this, Elijah said, watching in amazement as Lumera deftly navigated the system. He kept a lot of secrets, Lumera replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. Xylan tech is incredibly unstable. He probably wanted to protect me. Hours passed in a blur of code and alien symbols. Finally, with a triumphant cry, Lumera cracked the final encryption. A series of files appeared on the screen. We're in, she announced, her voice filled with excitement. Let's see what Zack was hiding. The first file they opened was a detailed report on a galactic consortium known as the Umbra Collective. The report alleged that the collective was secretly exploiting Xylan technology for their own nefarious purposes. The Umbra Collective? Elijah asked, scrolling through the report. I've never heard of them. They operate in the shadows, Lumera explained. A powerful group of corporations and politicians with influence across multiple star systems. They're rumored to dabble in things they shouldn't. The next file contained a list of names, each accompanied by a series of numbers and symbols. This looks like a ledger, Elijah said, squinting at the screen. But what do these numbers mean? Lumera examined the ledger closely. These aren't just numbers, she said. They're coordinates. Coordinates to Xylan artifact sites. Elijah's eyes widened. Xylan artifact sites? But those are supposed to be off-limits. The Xylan Enclave has strict rules against anyone disturbing their ancient sites. The Umbra Collective doesn't care about rules, Lumera said grimly. They're looting these sites for Xylan technology. And I think I know why. She opened the final file, a heavily encrypted document that took several minutes to decrypt. When it finally opened, Elijah gasped. This is incredible, he said, staring at the schematics on the screen. It's a design for a Xylan weapon. A weapon capable of destroying entire planets. Lumera nodded solemnly. The Umbra Collective is building a weapon of mass destruction. And they're using stolen Xylan technology to do it. Elijah felt a chill run down his spine. We have to stop them, he said. But how? They're a powerful organization. What can we do? We expose them, Lumera said firmly. We take this information to the Galactic Council. They have to know what the Umbra Collective is planning. But how do we get to the Galactic Council? Elijah asked. We're just a couple of nobodies with a stolen data core. I have a plan, Lumera said, a determined glint in her eyes. There's a Galactic Council summit happening on a neutral space station in the Kepler system. It's a high-security event, but I know someone who can get us in. Who? Elijah asked, his curiosity piqued. An old friend, Lumera said. Someone who owes me a favor. But it won't be easy. The summit is crawling with security. And if the Umbra Collective finds out what we know, they'll stop at nothing to silence us. We don't have a choice, Elijah said. We have to try. The fate of the galaxy depends on it. Lumera nodded in agreement. All right. Let's pack our bags. We're going to the Kepler system. As they prepared to leave, they heard a commotion outside the study. They peeked through the door to see Zara and the other house staff arguing in the hallway. Where do you think you're going? Zara demanded, blocking their path. Master Elijah, Lumera, we cannot allow you to leave. It is not safe. We're just going on a short trip, Elijah said, trying to sound casual. We'll be back in a few days. That is not what I was told, Zara said, her eyes narrowed. I received a message from a reliable source. The message said that you are planning to flee Azra with stolen Xylan technology. Elijah and Lamera exchanged worried glances. They had been betrayed. But who had betrayed them? That's ridiculous, Elijah said, trying to bluff his way out of the situation. We don't know anything about stolen Xylan technology. Do not lie to us, Master, Zara said, her voice cold. We know the truth. And we cannot allow you to leave. We are sworn to protect the estate, and that includes preventing you from using Xylan technology for your own purposes. I'm afraid we don't have time for this, Lamera said, raising her hand. A small energy pistol materialized in her palm. Stand aside, Zara. We don't want to hurt you. Zara stared at the energy pistol, her expression unyielding. I cannot allow you to leave, she repeated. Lamera sighed. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this. With a swift movement, she fired the energy pistol, stunning Zara and the other house staff. They collapsed to the floor, unconscious. I'm sorry, Lamera said, her voice filled with regret. But we have no choice. We have to stop the Umbra Collective, even if it means hurting those who are loyal to us. Elijah nodded in agreement. They had crossed a line. There was no turning back now. They grabbed their bags and fled the estate, heading for the spaceport and a new chapter in their adventure. The space station orbiting Kepler 186f was a chaotic hub of diplomats, merchants, and spies. Elijah, disguised in a nondescript gray suit, felt like a fish out of water among the elegantly dressed aliens. Lamera, however, seemed perfectly at home, navigating the crowded corridors with a confidence that belied their precarious situation. Are you sure your friend will help us? Elijah asked, his eyes scanning the crowd. Jax owes me, Lamera replied, her voice tight. But he's not exactly known for his altruism. He'll want something in return. They reached a dimly lit cantina in the lower levels of the station. Lamera led Elijah to a secluded booth in the back. A shadowy figure was already waiting for them. Jax, Lamera said, her voice cool. It's been too long. Jax was a Rodian, his large, multifaceted eyes gleaming in the dim light. Lamera, he rasped, his voice gravelly. I heard you were back in business. What can I do for you? We need access to the Galactic Council Summit, Lamera said. We have information that could save the galaxy. Jax chuckled. Save the galaxy? That's a bit dramatic, isn't it? What's in it for me? Lamera slid a datapad across the table. Information on the Umbra Collective's illicit activities. I know you've been looking for something to use against them. Jax's eyes widened as he examined the datapad. Interesting, he said, a predatory smile spreading across his face. Very interesting. All right, I'll get you in. But you owe me big time. Jax provided them with fake credentials and a detailed map of the space station. He warned them that the summit was heavily guarded and that they would need to be careful. Once you're in, find Counselor Volkov, Jax said. He's the most influential member of the Galactic Council. If you can convince him to listen to you, he might be able to help. Elijah and Lamera thanked Jax and made their way to the summit hall. The security was even tighter than they had anticipated. They had to pass through multiple checkpoints, each guarded by heavily armed security droids. They managed to slip through the checkpoints using their fake credentials, but Elijah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they entered the summit hall, he spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Lamera, he whispered, grabbing her arm. That man. Over there. I saw him back on Azra. He was talking to Zara. Lamera followed his gaze. It's one of the Umbra Collective's enforcers, she said grimly. They know we're here. We need to find Counselor Volkov, and fast. They scanned the room, searching for Counselor Volkov. They finally spotted him standing near the stage, surrounded by a group of advisors. "That's him," Lamera said, pointing to a tall, imposing figure with a stern expression. "Let's go." They approached Counselor Volkov and tried to get his attention, but his advisors blocked their path. "Counselor Volkov is busy," one of them said. "He does not have time to speak with you." "We have important information," Elijah insisted. "Information that could save the galaxy." The advisor scoffed. "Everyone claims to have information that could save the galaxy. Please, leave us alone." As they were arguing with the advisor, the Umbra Collective enforcer approached them from behind. He grabbed Elijah's arm and pulled him away from the crowd. "We need to talk," the enforcer said, his voice cold. "You have something that belongs to us." Elijah tried to pull away, but the enforcer's grip was too strong. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, trying to bluff his way out of the situation. "Don't play coy with me," the enforcer said, tightening his grip. "We know you have the Xylan data core. Give it to us, and we'll let you walk away." "I don't have anything," Elijah insisted. The enforcer raised his hand, preparing to strike. But before he could land a blow, Lamera intervened. She kicked the enforcer in the groin, sending him stumbling backward. "Run, Elijah," she shouted. "I'll hold them off." Elijah didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted towards Counselor Volkov, pushing past the advisors and grabbing the counselor's arm. "Counselor Volkov," he said, his voice breathless. "We need to talk. It's about the Umbra Collective." Counselor Volkov looked at him with surprise. "Who are you?" he asked. "And what do you know about the Umbra Collective?" "They're building a weapon of mass destruction," Elijah said. "Using stolen Xylan technology. We have proof." Counselor Volkov's expression turned serious. "Proof? Show me." Elijah pulled out the datapad and showed Counselor Volkov the files they had decrypted. As the counselor examined the data, his eyes widened in shock. "This is unbelievable," he said. "If this is true, the Umbra Collective must be stopped." At that moment, the Umbra Collective enforcer burst through the crowd, followed by several security droids. "Stop them," he shouted. "They have stolen property." Counselor Volkov raised his hand, silencing the enforcer. "These individuals have brought me evidence of the Umbra Collective's crimes," he said. "I order you to stand down." The security droids hesitated, unsure of what to do. The enforcer glared at Counselor Volkov, his face contorted with rage. "You have made a mistake," he said. "You will regret this." Counselor Volkov ignored the enforcer and turned to Elijah and Lamera. "I thank you for bringing this information to my attention," he said. "The Galactic Council will investigate these claims. If what you say is true, the Umbra Collective will face the full force of the law." Elijah and Lamera exchanged relieved glances. They had done it. They had exposed the Umbra Collective and saved the galaxy. But their adventure was far from over. They knew that the Umbra Collective would not give up easily. They would come after them, seeking revenge. And Elijah and Lamera would be ready. They had found their purpose. They would continue to fight for justice, to protect the galaxy from those who sought to exploit it.